kick off our business of shaping policy, and that's going to start from the US, where we'll be looking at the spending bill. That's the $460 billion that was passed by the US Senate on Friday. Interestingly, on Saturday, the President, Joe Biden, decided to sign the bill. What are the details of the spending bills, and what will be the outcome for those who are concerned and all the federal agencies that are in picture? We are being joined by Sam Orovwuje, who is going to provide more perspective to this. He joins us in the studio. Sam, glad to have you join us this morning.
Good morning, Femi. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Blessing. Thank you.
All right. Before we go to the details of the spending bills, which what we call appropriation bill here, let me have you react to the drama that preceded the passage of this bill. You know, the divided House and the debate in the House or in the Congress that happened before the passage of this bill on Friday, and eventually the decision by the President Biden to sign this bill on Saturday. So let me have your take on the controversies that preceded the passage of the bill first.
Thank you very much indeed, Femi. I think one of the major issues in parliamentary procedure is that there are debates here and there. The Republicans in particular have been, since October last year, which the fiscal year started with, which is going to end September this year, has been involved in trying to see how they can cut the bill in some area. But the problem within the Republican Party has slowed down some of the procedure. But by and large, if that decision was not made on Friday, there would have been a problem in the U.S. because over 10 to 11 federal agencies and state departments were involved, and they quickly made that decision, and overwhelmingly they voted in favor so that they don't see the country get into a problem. But then, these are part of the parliamentary procedure, but what is important is that finally that it was signed into law on Saturday to save those federal governments and departments of not having money to spend. That would have been a major issue, but we knew that at the end of the day they will come to reason, and they will leave their partisan nature to sign what is the common interest of the United States of America.
So this partisan nature that has lingered for quite a while, the spending bills or the funding bills for which they are still dragging should have been done as far back as October, but they've been dragging and just making temporary arrangements. What is the issue? One would think that for a country like US, regardless of the disagreement or the division across different parties, it wouldn't drag to an extent like this.
No, I think that is the beauty of parliamentary proceeding. Even though it drags so long, we knew at the end of the day that before the timelines expire, something will have been done. But like I said earlier, there's been a high debate from the Republican Party to see how they can make some cuts on the bills. But that notwithstanding, they were able to come together, particularly in the upper house, which eventually made that decision on Friday, and by Saturday, everything was. But there are some other departments whose consideration has not been met. But in due course, I'm sure that those decisions will be made so that everything will be, because by September, the fiscal year will have ended like what started in October. But I think is okay. What it is the beauty of democracy is that compromises will have to be made at some point, and those compromises were made on Friday, where that bipartisan nature was brought to bear and things finally took shape.
Is the forthcoming U.S. election any feel to this? Is this a particular situation?
Well, I don't think so personally. There may be some inner workings that have led to that, but in the public domain, I don't see any relationship. I just think that the issue between the Democrats and the Republican within the House and that of the Senate has been ongoing for a while, but I don't think it's essentially about the U.S. election, in my view.
There are some senators who argue that the U.S. Senate didn't have enough time to scrutinize this bill. Unlike the House of Reps, they passed their version last year. And then knowing fully well that the president, a day after, had to sign this bill. Do you think this was done in a hurry just to avert the shutdown?
Yes, on one breath, yes, it was done in a hurry so that the system does not collapse. But on the other hand, if the Senate from October till early March had not had an opportunity to scrutinize the bill, then it's rather unfortunate because the Senate Committee on Appropriation was supposed to have looked at those figures carefully. So I think I will see it from the point of view of political brinksmanship for those senators to save their face towards the end for the job that they ought to have done in the last 4 months or thereabout.
Let's look at the 6 bills that were considered and made provision for. We have bills like agriculture, transportation, veteran affairs, and school cafeteria, housing, and those like. So, having selected like the most important of them or the ones with pressing needs, how soon do you think the others will be given attention? The
others will come quickly because defense has not been considered. You have those critical ones like Food and Drug Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency aligns with the other ministry that you just spoke about. Transportation is critical to the sector. But I do know that within the shortest possible time, maybe before 23rd of March, that will come to full conclusion. But those critical ones that are so important to the life wire of the economy were those ones that they quickly put on the table and they had to pass that. But in spite of the challenge with the Republican in terms of how to cut down on some of those bills, I'm sure by 22nd, 23rd of March, the whole subject matter will have been dealt with appropriately.
Now let's look at the voting pattern, the pattern of the vote on Friday. You have 75 against 22. 75 went for the bill, supported the bill. 22 went against it. What does that suggest to you about
That's overwhelming. I think that was done in the national interest. That speaks to the national interest. That in spite of the differences between the core conservative in the House and some other Republican, even within the Republican Party, they have some issue that makes national interest override every partisan interest. That's what that speaks to, in my view.
Now, looking at the division, what could you say is the stand of either party over these bills?
With the pattern of vote on Friday, it shows that the national interest supersedes those other wranglings, particularly from the two political parties that are playing out in the House. So I think in a simple term, that's what it just shows.
Is it about a thing of, what is allocated to a particular ministry or area being too much or not necessary? What could be the thrust of the disagreement? What do you suspect is?
No, I think Republican, from the beginning of October when the bill was laid before the Congress, they've been clamoring to make some cuts in terms of spending of a particular ministry. And that, even though they made some demands which were far-reaching for some Republican, but by and large, they couldn't get through with some of those cuts that they intended. I think that's what drags on for a while. So that idea that some of these bills from some of those agencies and Department of Government, they could make some savings so that they can apply that to some other sector within the U.S. economy. But by and large, that didn't get through, and they have no other option in the interest of the country than to sign that bill.
Now, let's look at the set of people that will be directly affected by this bill. You have the farmers, the veterans, the firefighters. Now that the bill is being passed, what will be the implication for this set of people?
For the firefighter, there's an ongoing demand to increase their wages and salaries. So with this bill coming through, there will be increase in wages and salaries, particularly for the firefighter. It's one of those elements that was brought before the Congress last year. So it will be the veterans, people that have served the country and they are in retirement. So this is a good news for them, and they will continue to get what they deserve. But for the firefighters in particular, they've been crying for wage increments. So with this bill signed into law, those proposals will now be put on the table, and people will receive what is due to them.
What about the farmers?
Everybody will get their fair deal since those things have been signed into law. So all those packages that take care of everybody within those bills will now be brought to the table, and everybody will be happy at the end of the day.
All right, let's look at some of the ministries that we're taking care of, or some items in the package that we're taking care of. What is the lesson to learn? For instance, one of them is school cafeterias. It became important to them that regardless of disagreement, some funding had to go there. What can other countries, particularly African countries, learn from that?
It simply means that we have to take the national interest above every other interest, and once an interest can serve the citizen to a very large extent, those ideas must be pursued to their logical conclusion. I think that's the lesson that African government, when they talk about social intervention that benefit the citizens directly, they should focus on that and look away from their partisan nature to see what benefit the common man on the street.
Now, looking at the drama in the U.S. Congress and then the controversy, don't you think with this kind of development is going to cause distortion when it comes to the fiscal year? You know, do you foresee any distortion?
I don't think so, since that has been signed on Saturday, and hopefully by 22nd of March, the other outstanding things we go through, and the fiscal year starts from October to September. So September is still a long way from now. I don't think there will be major distortion on the economy, and I think those in the Congress will take cognizance of the implication of not putting things in place on time.
Now, are there certain businesses that might be impacted as a result of this release of funds in tranches? Are there certain developments that may be impacted?
There are always windows for spending, even when the bill has not been passed into law. So in such respect, I don't think there will be so much impact. There will be a few impact here and there, but the system will have a way of balancing itself out in terms of the gaps that exist as a result of the ongoing issue within the Congress.
Now, the budget allocations for these agencies ought to have expired March 1st, but you know, due to this drama, it was extended by a week for them to be able to have this debate and then pass it through. What are the lessons here?
I think the lesson is that even where there are challenges within a system, there are mechanisms that are put in place to find a way to resolve those crises. Even when that is supposed to have taken effect from March, there were some provisions, and I'm sure within their constitutional framework, those provisions are there. And like in our climb as well, we have that kind of provisions within the Constitution that take care of such gaps that may exist from time to time, occasioning from some of the issues at the parliamentary proceeding.
Now, for the others, the other packages, they have till March 22 to attend to them. And then today's March 11th, so just like 11 more days to attend to that. Isn't this fire brigade approach, and what does it say about the U.S.?
No, there's nothing uniquely different because people are involved, and once people are involved, there are disagreements. And one of the beauty of democracy is to reach compromise. And once there are differences, once compromise are reached, then the system will take care of himself. I don't think there's anything really unusual, particularly where people differ on a policy framework on how certain issues should run within the U.S. And at the end of the day, once compromises are reached between the various parties, then the issues will be resolved. I don't think something untoward has happened. So I think it will improve on the parliamentary proceeding, in my view, where people can differ and reach compromises and the national interest supersede every other interest.
Now let's look at President Joe Biden's administration and the way he's handling the economy. You know, when it comes to election year, the issue of the economy is always very crucial. How will you assess the economy under the administration of Joe Biden? And in recent times, how will you describe some of his economic policies and impact?
I think in terms of job creation, the Joe Biden administration has done remarkably well, in spite of the great opposition in some respect from the Republican Party. Beyond his age, which has become a major challenge in some of the issues that are being currently debated in the U.S. But I think he has not done too badly in the last 4 years or thereabout. But then the challenge is whether the citizens will come back to vote for him, remain to be seen as we move closer to the election period in the U.S.
All right, talking about job creation in the U.S. totaled about 275,000 in February, but the unemployment rate has also risen to about 3.9%. What do you think could be the reason, and what needs to be done to match up the job created with the unemployment rate?
I think what they estimated, they've not gotten to the figures that they estimated. So that is understandable, so based on estimate. But by and large, when you look at the non-farm employment figure that has jumped up at the end of February, it looks remarkable. Even the government agencies themselves, restaurants and some other businesses has brought about that spike in terms of the job creation. But the rate of employment rising to about 3.9% look a major challenge for the administration. And based on the forecast, I'm sure within the next 1 month, more jobs will be created, and that rise will be reduced to a very large extent.
Now let's go to the details of the job creation according to statistics provided by the Labor Bureau of Statistics. It says healthcare led with 67,000 new jobs. Government again was a big contributor with 52,000, while restaurants and bars added 42,000. What do you make of this statistics? Starting with healthcare, 67,000, the one created by the government, 52,000. Restaurants and bar, 42,000. I want you to look at the pattern. There's a part being played by the government, a part being played by the private sector. You understand? So what do you make of these statistics?
I think the private sector have led that part. Government provided about 52,000 jobs, and that of the healthcare, which is a critical sector of the economy, and the value chain in terms of health sector delivery is large. So that's account for the figure. Then in terms of restaurant business, quick serve and the bar and butcheries also have a hike. So what that shows is that the dominant job creator within any economy is the private sector. So even though the government created some of those jobs, the informal sector and the private sector are the most critical sector that help to create jobs for the citizens. So they have trends in terms of the statistics like you just rolled out from the Department of Labor. And there's a Labor Bureau statistic that take care of those figures. So, and those projections is that some more jobs will be created in no distant time, and that 3.9 unemployment figure that jumped a little up from 3.2 or 3.7% as of January will reduce drastically.
I still find that figure, quite interesting. Restaurants and bars providing 42,000 jobs. What does that suggest about that sector in the U.S.?
That's a sector that is tied to the tourism industry. So, and most Americans are dependent on quick serve stores, what you call restaurants. So, there's a improvement in that sector in terms of service that they provide in that sector. So normally they will create more job in that sector because it's tied to some other industry.
And perhaps their services are in high demand because they are necessities.
Of course, basic.
So the purpose of people getting job is to earn a living, but hourly earnings was watched closely over the month because of inflation. So wages only grew by 0.1%. Do you think that is enough? Even though they're watching inflation, should it be increased more than that? So those who are working, earning, should have more disposable income.
There are speculations that that 0.1% to a very large extent will not be able to control inflation, and there's a likelihood that the Federal Reserve Bank is likely to cut the rate sometime in the nearest future, and I think they are meeting sometime next week, and let's see what happens with that. So I don't think by and large those figures are a very bad figure. If you look at the projections that they've made, there's been a remarkable increase in terms of the trajectory which the forecast made for the country.
Now, what do you make of the pattern as regards unemployment rate and job creation in the U.S.? If you look at the figure for January and that of February, what are your deductions?
There's been an improvement month on month. So to that extent, I'm sure that at the end of March, more jobs were created, and the figure that we're considering today, maybe if we have the opportunity to speak on those issues again, we'll be looking at another figure. And I recall maybe sometime last week, we were talking about the U.S. economy. The projection that we had was slightly lower than what we currently have as of today. So that means that more opportunities will come, particularly now that the bills has been signed into law, and that will energize the economy to a very large extent, and more jobs will be created.
So the 275,000 jobs that were created actually are non-farm jobs. Now, compared to maybe Africa or a country like Nigeria, where there is advocacy for people to return to the farms, to embrace agriculture, but you have 275 jobs that are not linked to farming. Is the U.S. so food sufficient, or is the farming, the agriculture sector, a strict sector that people don't easily get into? What's your take on this?
No, they get into the agri sector, the farm sector, or maybe for just this particular period of time, the jobs that were created were particularly non-farm sector. That means it's not to say that the farming sector do not require employment.
But it's sorry to cut in, but it's ordinarily, maybe looking from the needs of African countries, it seems like when employment wants to be, when the government wants to create employment, the agriculture sector is like the easiest to just bring in people, and then you also increase food production. But this seems to be like the reverse.
No, but for me, in terms of government engaging people in the farm is speculative in terms of creating job. The clamor is that people should go back to farm so that we can increase on our food security. But on the other hand, the agri sector is more mechanized. The value chain in terms of farming is well entrenched, and so a lot of people are already employed in that area. But this particular point in time, the jobs that were made available are non-farm sector. That's not to undermine that that sector does not create a job opportunity. It's just the figure that we currently have. But here, how many people would the government really encourage to go into farm, even when they are not supporting in terms of extension services, providing mechanized instruments for people to farm, so that the opportunities that are bound in that sector will increase maximally.
Now, let's look at the U.S. situation and compare it to that of Africa or extension Nigeria. You have job reports being released in January, and then you know the number of jobs being created by the government, the private sector, and even the sectors that are affected. Now in February, the same figures are being released. In how climb do we have this kind of statistics, this kind of pattern, whereby it informs the citizens or citizenry of job creation, the statistics every month? I'm not saying quarterly now, but this is monthly. It's monthly. It's a monthly approach to release of the statistics.
Yeah,
what lesson would that be for Africa and other?
I think the challenge here is how do we collect data? How do we deploy data beyond the Bureau of Statistics? These various ministries, like labor in particular in the US, has its own statistics in terms of collating figures when it comes to employment and unemployment. So the lesson for us, or the takeaway, is that the departments of government in Africa must find a way to create efficient data collection mechanism that will ensure data accuracy, and that the data that they actually get to the field is what is reported. So the lesson for us is that various departments, even while the National Bureau of Statistics is there as an omnibus government agency that deals with the data analysis and data collection, but then each department should be able to have evidence-based data collection mechanism that people can say these data are trusted, they are reliable, and they are valid, so that when you push out certain elements into the public domain, we can trust those data. But as we speak, our data management ecosystem is faulty, so we need to recalibrate it, re-engineer it, so that we can really get actual data.
Now, talking about data, it looks like this data is going to be subject to quick change, as the job creation was skewed towards part-time jobs. So it doesn't look like over some time, those people who had the part-time jobs may be changing jobs or may be relieved and will also be in the unemployment side.
No, the pattern is that they are looking at the aggregate in terms of labor demand. What it means is that some people must of necessity, and some industry are configured based on part-time job basis. Maybe when they leave those kind of job, maybe they equally have other jobs that are driven by part-time basis. So those statistics are there in terms of whether it's a full-time job, whether it's a part-time job, whether it's an hourly based job. Those statistics speak to those specific job, and those ecosystem support the various kind of job. Even when you have some basic job, and when you finish on a job and you have an opportunity for a part-time job, you can still get that job. And those who are captured within the statistics of employment, unemployment, underemployment. So I think it's just a natural ways of taking care of the system.
But the statistics also show that full-time jobs declined by 187,000, while part-time jobs increased by 51,000 jobs. Does that suggest some layoff?
Yes, to some extent, maybe there will be no continuity of some of those jobs, but some, maybe depending on the arrangement of what people make, there are people who actually opt to work on part-time basis rather than full-time jobs. So the scenario varies from one state to the other within the US. So that we don't really have the full data beyond the aggregate that we have. So it might be difficult to speak to that issue unless we really have specific industry that are part-time based, the full-time job that decline in the period under review. So I think what we have access to the real data, we may need to see how, to what extent, what balancing act does those who are on part-time and those who left the job. But what is important is that jobs are created from time to time, whether they are full-time, whether they are part-time basis.
But what do you think is influencing this job cut? You know, you have layoffs happening, you know, even tech companies were being affected in the US. What do you think is informing or is influencing this kind of pattern?
Once companies are not able to operate optimally in terms of their own projections, they may not have any other option to disengage some of the workers. So most important thing is that most companies go into business to make profit after creating those activities, and if some of those jobs cannot impact their bottom line, then they may have to disengage some people. And sometimes when people are disengaged, they are reskilled to go into other sector to work in those clients.
All right, so going forward, what can be done to increase the jobs available, particularly full-time jobs, which ensure job security?
Well, that has to do with the economy. If the economy rebounds fully, then you're able to create more jobs, then people will have full job. But if the economy is struggling or businesses are struggling, it might be very difficult to sustain full-time job. So you need to reflect the economy, and I'm sure that with signing bill into law, some of those critical sector of the economy will find a way to absorb more people into various departments and agencies of government, and those who provide ancillary services to those departments will be able to record some of the people they have been disengaged.
Now let's bring the conversation home and look at our climb here. In Nigeria, the highest employer of labor, that's the government. You know, if you look at the pattern in the US between the private sector and the government, almost at par with these statistics, what does that suggest to you about the capacity of the private sector in Nigeria and the need for them to, you know, up their game? Should we just maintain that pattern where government remains the highest employer of labor, or you think the private sector can increase that figure?
I have a feeling that of the view that the government is the highest employer of labor.
And would that remain so?
No, I have my reservation whether that that statistic is real. We're over 200 million people, and if you put the public service and the civil service, local government, state to federal, and look at the total number of the workforce, I'm not too sure that the government is the highest employer of labor, in my view. I think that the informal sector is the highest employer of labor, and that speaks to the earlier conversation that we had. When you talk about statistics, real statistics, in terms of who is employing who, which sector is even the greater contributor, beyond looking at the aggregate contribution, then I'm sure that claim that the government is the highest employer of labor, I doubt that. If we put the total number of the public service, agencies and department of government, and look at the informal sector, and look at businesses, I'm sure that the informal sector is a major employer. But I don't have my hand on the statistic, but my hunch tells me that the government cannot be the greater employer of labor in Nigeria.
Anyway, let's leave that debate for another day. But the conversation here is, let's look at the impact of the private sector here compared to that of the government. Now, in terms of statistics, like you said, which is a huge challenge. Now, how do we improve on that, providing the right statistics? You have the Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria who are to provide this. When it comes to the economy, that of inflation, some of the statistics, you get them monthly. Can they adopt same approach to job creation? And then if you need to look at that of the private sector, how do you source for that kind of data? That of government could be easier because some of these agencies could be approached for their data in terms of job creation. But for the private sector, how would this be approached?
The private sector does not operate in isolation. So they have some basic statistics. I think the challenge here is the way we deal with data, the way we collect data, and the way we use data. So in a matter of speaking, the local government should come up with that responsibility of finding a way to capture data. States should capture data. Departments and agencies should capture those data before they aggregate them to the National Bureau of Statistics that has the core responsibility or mandate to collect those data. But sometimes the data are there, but I think to a very large extent, we're a bit reticent when it comes to the use of data in our client. So the data are there. You have a payee system from the private sector that submits data in terms of those who are on the payroll to state government that has the responsibility to collect the payee tax. You have other kinds of taxation. You have the local government collecting rates on wheelbarrows, wine, sellers in the local government. You have shops, receipts and all that. So the data are there. But to what extent can we calibrate this data and become useful? And each department of government rely on this data for planning purposes.
All right, talking about what to adopt here, if you look at the sector standpoint of the jobs created, you find that the health sector led by about 67,000, bringing it home now to Nigeria, where we've had issues of brain drain and the complaint from medical practitioners of you having about one doctor to more than 1,000 patients. What should be copied here?
I think what the government should do is particularly the health sector, which is very critical to all other sector, massive investment, the payment and the working condition of the medical personnel must be improved upon. So those clients where they are able to pay higher salaries and wages, we should find a way to get the brain gain by putting all the necessary mechanism in place so that people don't go elsewhere where they are more valued and they get more emolument in terms of what they pay at the end of the day. So government has a critical responsibility in terms of finding the environment first and foremost suitable, providing the right equipment for the medical personnel, then find a way to improve on the entire health sector policy so that we can get more people in that sector.
Thank you very much, Sam Orovwuje, Director, Center for Public Policy, for staying with us on the show today. I wouldn't want to say, being the in-house analyst, you're more or less a part and parcel of Early Exchange. So thank you for being with us on this first segment of the show.
Thank you very much indeed. Blessing.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.